All right, I think I'm good. So let's continue from where we were yesterday. We are picking up on Garrison's David Ferrie files, all 428 pages of them. Actually, there's another file that's about 350 pages, so we got about 800 pages of David Ferrie files. We're not going to go through all 800 yet. We're going to do this first batch of 428 pages, yeah, we'll see how far that takes us. Probably another 2 weeks. But this is history. This is how fucking history gets done. This is how historians work. It's very tedious, very time-consuming, and you need to be okay with spending hours and hours studying something that may turn out to be nothing. So, fortunately, Garrison did a lot of work for us in compiling all these files. Most of the stuff here is relevant. So this here appears to be a letter in the David Ferrie file from Dick Billings. It says Haskell, February 14th, 1967, NBC, and David William Ferrie, C. Warren Commission, Volume 24, page 454, CE 2038. Barnes said Bob Mulholland of NBC News Chicago talked in Dallas to one Ferrie, a narcotics addict, now out on bail on sodomy charges in Dallas. Ferrie said that Oswald had been under hypnosis from a man doing a mind-reading act at Ruby's Carousel. Ferrie was said to be a private detective and the owner of an airplane who took young boys on flights just for kicks. Sodomy charge in Dallas. I don't know why he's got a sodomy charge in Dallas. I'll have to look into that. I think that might be a mistake. The above Barnes is Gene Barnes of NBC, a West Coast cameraman. Bob Mulholland is now producer of the Huntley-Brinkley Show in Washington. I spoke with Mulholland as well as Dick Valeriani and Dick Fisher, all of whom were in Dallas for NBC during the weekend of November 22nd to 26, 1963. Mulholland was directing the NBC coverage of the assassination. Mulholland said he remembered something about a guy with an airplane, that the name Ferrie or Ferrie was familiar, and that he had a vague memory of someone flying guns to Cuba and queers. Mulholland did not speak to anyone in Dallas as he was busy with an NBC crew, and did not recognize the picture of Ferrie, handwritten. He recalled that he probably heard the above from John Corporan of NBC News New Orleans. Now, John Corporan, that becomes really important because John Corporan is the one directly responsible for putting Oswald on television when he is interviewed and all that stuff. So John Corporan, who was an associate of Jesse Core, who Jesse Core worked for Clay Shaw, and Jesse Core was an associate of William Gaudet, who triggered the entire line of events that resulted in Oswald getting on television. So he recalled that he probably heard the above from John Corporan of NBC News New Orleans. Mulholland said that Corporan called and told him about Ferrie, and shortly thereafter the FBI visited Mulholland. He remembers the story because of the FBI visit, that is when he discovered his phone was tapped. Valeriani and Fisher remember the incident. I called John Corporan, who is now with WNEW-TV News in New York. Interesting. So John Corporan goes from WDSU New Orleans, where he promotes Oswald, to a New York station. Sounds like a promotion, if you ask me. He remembers the story very well. We got an anonymous tip, and one from a former assistant DA about this man who had an airplane, and that this man was due in Texas on November 22nd. This man, Ferrie, had known Oswald in the Civil Air Patrol. He was probably a homosexual. There was something about a rendezvous having been arranged to fly Oswald out of the country. Corporan says he then called Garrison to find out about the trip. I didn't have too much success. He then called Mulholland in Dallas. Soon after that call, he too received a visit from the FBI. Garrison then arrested Ferrie. On Monday, Ferrie called Corporan and said he had seen him giving editorials on TV and he wanted to talk. Corporan went over to the jail, and he remembers Ferrie had a migraine headache. He also remembers he was an odd duck. They talked for 1/2 hour, and Ferrie convinced Corporan that someone had very cleverly linked Ferrie to Oswald, knowing it looked believable. Ferrie was very upset. When Corporan left the cell, the Secret Service went in. After them, the FBI talked with Ferrie. After them, Garrison's men went in. Corporan was the first to talk with Ferrie. Fucking fascinating. Ferrie was working as private investigator for a prominent New Orleans lawyer, G. Ray Gill. I think Gill got him released and then fired him. Ferrie called me a couple times after that, protesting his innocence. The story continued to intrigue me, so we tried to follow it up, but then we decided there was nothing to pursue and gave up. Personally, I think Garrison arrested Ferrie in order to make himself famous, but maybe the FBI asked Garrison to make the arrest because they didn't want to be involved if the accusation turned out to be false, which it did. Corporan was in a hurry, and he was also rather curious as to why I was so interested in Ferrie. I didn't want to pursue it too far in case he might mention my call to any of his friends in New Orleans. Too bad, but it looks like by the time the story got to Barnes, it had been added to mind-reading stories, etc. And the FBI, knowing all about Ferrie anyway, just discounted it. As far as I can find, Ferrie's name is not mentioned anywhere else in the Warren Commission books or the National Archive Index of material received from the Commission or the FBI Secret Service. So that's some insight into what happened to David Ferrie when he was arrested on Monday the 25th. All right, we're going to move on to this February 28, 1967 document to Louis Ivan, chief investigator, from Sergeant Fenner Sedgebeer. Reference Roy Tell. Employed by Swift Company, Harvey, Louisiana, married with 2 children. At about 3:15 p.m. Friday, February 24, 1967, I interviewed Roy Tell at his residence. Roy Tell stated that he has not heard from Dave Ferrie since around New Year's 1967, at which time they exchanged greetings at the New Orleans airport. He explains that he had been closely associated with Ferrie back in the late 50s while he was executive secretary in the Civil Air Patrol Moisant Division. He explains that Ferrie was a devout Catholic and insisted that the boys attend their church. Ferrie often referred the boys to Father Sebastian Argonello, who may be in New Orleans at this time, however, was located in Raceland, Louisiana, and was at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Kenner, Louisiana. Ferrie also referred to the Catholic Church as being communistic and talked about the merits of communism. Roy Tell remembered receiving a telephone call from Ferrie shortly after the president's assassination, and Ferrie explained to him that he was working with the FBI and was seeking information as to Oswald, and also wanted to locate Edward Vobel and George Walters. Roy Tell remembered the name Oswald as having been in the Civil Air Patrol but could not place him. He was going to check at his mother's house and see if he could find any old records or photographs relating to any of these individuals. The following individuals were named by Tell as being closely associated with Dave Ferrie: Oliver St. P., Larry Anderson, Thomas Compton, Melvin Coffey, and Gene and Richard Marshall. I think we went over this one a couple days ago. There's a lot of duplication of stuff in the Garrison files. Okay, so Alvin Oser, District Attorney 2, from Sergeant Duffy, and don't know what that is. PTN Cliency Navarre Investigators. Interview with Thomas Compton. Okay, Thomas Compton. This is important because this, the incident with Thomas Compton in Hammond, Louisiana, the weekend of the assassination, completely debunks any idea that David Ferrie was in New Orleans on the 22nd. He was definitely in Dallas. He never went to the Winterland, and the entire story about the Winterland was really just creating an alibi for David Ferrie, because David Ferrie was in Dallas. He was one of 2 shooters on the grassy knoll, and from Dallas he leaves in a light blue Ford Falcon station wagon, most likely rented by James Llewellyn. Okay, and so then he drives that to Hammond, Louisiana, and I'll continue with this story as we go through, but let's continue with this document. Sergeant Tom Duffy and PTN Cliency Navarre report of interviewing one Thomas Compton residing at 1525 Aztec Street, Apartment C, on March 9th, 1967 at 10:30 a.m. in the office of the District Attorney, 2700 Tulane Avenue. Mr. Compton stated he was a member of the Moisant wing of the Civil Air Patrol from 1954 until January of 1968. 58, sorry. He was acquainted with David Ferrie on and off for approximately 10 years. On one occasion, he visited Ferrie at a residence on Vinette Street and another single visit in Airline Park. Mr. Compton stated that in the spring of 1964, he stopped for gas in a service station on the Veterans Highway and again met David Ferrie. Mr. Compton related that after learning Dave Ferrie and Al Landry owned this station, he obtained a part-time job as an attendant. Okay, let's stop the fucking presses. Stop the presses. Mr. Compton stated in the spring of '64 he stopped for gas in a service station on the Veterans Highway and again met Dave Ferrie. Mr. Compton related that after learning Dave Ferrie and Al Landry owned this station, he obtained a part-time job as an attendant. Well, here's the fucking problem with that. The problem with that is that there are other documents that state that the co-owner of this gas station was not Al Landry, but Al Bobouf. So we have some obfuscation here over who was really the partner with Dave Ferrie, because Al Landry, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the kids that Ferrie had fucking molested. And by this point, Al Landry had gone off to join the Marines. So I don't know that this is accurate. Or was Al Landry just an alias that was being used by Bobouf? Who knows? That's how the alias game works. These guys share names of real people. That's the alias game. After working a short period and unable to collect his pay and not being relieved on duty by Landry, he decided to quit. While employed at this service station, he helped David Ferrie tow his airplane over to the station. The aircraft was in terrible condition, more so from vandals than deterioration or wear and tear. Mr. Compton stated that the last time he knew of Dave Ferrie flying his plane was 1957, and rumors of the same up to 1961. Mr. Compton further stated that sometime before the assassination of President Kennedy, he drove Dave Ferrie to Camp Street across from the Lafayette Square to Guy Bannister's office. Guy Bannister and Dave Ferrie then went to a coffee shop on the corner and talked over a beverage. Mr. Compton then related that he sat at another table in this establishment and did not hear any of the conversation. Also, he could not remember how long before the assassination this took place. Compton continued to state that on Sunday after the assassination at 5:30 a.m., he was awakened by David Ferrie in his dormitory bed at the University of Southeastern in Hammond, Louisiana. This paragraph that I'm going over is one of the most important paragraphs in all documents of all Kennedy literature, period. Mr. Compton continued to state that on Sunday, Sunday after the assassination at 5:30 a.m. So you have it become Sunday at midnight, right? So it's Saturday. Midnight, it becomes Sunday. And then 5:30 in the morning is 5.5 hours after midnight when it turns from Saturday to Sunday. I know that sounds like I'm stating the obvious. I'm not. It's extremely important that you comprehend the date and time that he claims David Ferrie woke him in his dormitory bed. 5:30 a.m. Sunday morning. That's 5.5 hours after Saturday. Okay? All right, now that I beat a dead horse, let's continue. Mr. Compton stated that until this day, he is uncertain how Dave Ferrie located him on this date. At this time, Dave Ferrie was in hysterics and near tears as he stated, "The police are at my home and have taken some of my things." Let's stop right here. At this time, Dave Ferrie was in hysterics and in near tears, and he stated, "The police are at my home and have taken some of my things." This is 100%, unquestionably, blatantly false. And how do I know this is false? Because David Ferrie's house was not searched by the fucking police, the FBI, and Garrison's team until Monday. Monday after midnight. Not Sunday. Monday. Monday after midnight, meaning hours after it had turned from Sunday into Monday. Okay? But here, Thomas Compton is saying that David Ferrie showed up at his house 5:30 a.m. Sunday. No, not possible. Because the incident that he's talking about didn't occur till Monday. But what did happen at 5:30 a.m. on Sunday? I fucking guarantee David Ferrie did show up in Hammond, Louisiana. Because he checked in at the Galveston Motel, the Driftwood. He checked in at the Driftwood at around 11 p.m. at night. And then made the 6.5 hour drive back to Hammond, Louisiana when he shows up at 5:30 in the morning on Sunday. Not Monday, Sunday. So he tells the truth about David Ferrie showing up on Sunday. But Thomas Compton lies about the reason that David Ferrie gave him for showing up. Compton stated that David Ferrie did not elaborate on my things and stated that Ferrie also related that he didn't do anything wrong. The two talked for a while on different unrelated subjects, and then Ferrie made 2 calls to New Orleans, and Compton believed they were to G. Ray Gill, attorney at law. Compton stated that Dave Ferrie left at approximately 8:30 a.m. The same morning, and is believed he returned to New Orleans in a Ford Falcon station wagon painted light blue. Okay, so some of the most important paragraphs in any documents ever are right here. The two talked for a while and blah, blah, blah. Compton stated that Dave Ferrie left at approximately 8:30 a.m. the same morning. That's false. That is also false, because David Ferrie shows up, 5:30 a.m. on Sunday. Leaves 3 hours later, 8:30 a.m. on Sunday. And he says Ferrie left in a Ford Falcon station wagon painted light blue, which is true. 100% true. Remember, it was a Ford Falcon station wagon that was checked in at Galveston Hotel, the Driftwood. But it was the blue Mercury Comet that was logged in at the Alamo Motel, right? So, yeah, car swapperoo here. Love it. But this is super important because this is all bullshit. Like, we know for fact that David Ferrie stayed the night, Sunday night, into Monday in Hammond, Louisiana with Thomas Compton. And he had actually shown up there Friday night. And we'll get to that in the coming documents. But, yeah, so Thomas Compton is lying. He's trying to cover for Ferrie, and he's giving facts that contradict the real story. Compton stated that David Ferrie did not tell him he'd been to Texas. Compton stated that he had never met Lee Harvey Oswald, also that he could not connect him in any way with the CAP. The only knowledge of Oswald came from Mr. Bill Wolfe, who also headed the New Orleans Astronomers Club. In 1956, Lee Harvey Oswald attempted to join this club and submitted an application which was refused. Compton related that after the assassination, Mr. Wolfe turned over this application to the FBI. Compton stated that shortly after the assassination, David Ferrie called Mr. Wolfe and inquired if he knew anything about Lee Harvey Oswald. Compton related that he couldn't figure out how David Ferrie had knowledge of Mr. Wolfe in the astronomy club and connecting this with Lee Harvey Oswald. Compton stated that he received a message that Dave Ferrie attempted to call him by telephone at 1 a.m. on the Tuesday before he died. Compton returned the call at 895-9811 and received no answer. Mr. Compton stated that David Ferrie had never mentioned the name of Clay Shaw to him. Compton did recall that after Clay Shaw was arrested, the meeting of he and David Ferrie in Hammond, and thought about this being the home of Shaw's parents. I thought Shaw's parents were in Alexandria. Okay, so let me do some more commentary on this, because obviously the file goes on to something else. But so this incident with Thomas Compton is the most important in debunking everything related to David Ferrie. Because David Ferrie was in Dallas, he was a shooter on the knoll, and then he flees to Hammond, Louisiana, where he gets there Friday night. He hides out there Friday night till Saturday. Then Saturday night he drives to Galveston. Galveston he drives back to Hammond after checking in, where he arrives at 5:30 in the morning on Sunday, just like Thomas Compton says. But he doesn't leave 3 hours later. He stays till the next day. And we know this because it's in his own testimony. Garrison knows it. Everybody fucking knows it. And Thomas Compton here is lying or pretending to not know the difference between Sunday and Monday. We're going to get more into this as we go through this file, because the thing that isn't covered yet is that Thomas Compton had a roommate named Frank J. Chilona. And Frank J. Chilona fucking just totally pours cold water on this bullshit story and just totally upends the entire official narrative. Like, Frank J. Chilona might be the most important fucking witness in the entire goddamn Kennedy assassination. Like, seriously, he's the one who fucking proves beyond all doubt that fucking David Ferrie did come from Dallas, that he was in the fucking dorm all weekend, and then he left on Monday morning. So, yeah, we will get to that, because that's some of the best shit. Just remember that name, Frank J. Chilona. Telephone conversations with Dean Andrews, 523-3957. Dean Andrews, lawyer, New Orleans associate of Clay Shaw and all these fucking guys. Dean Andrews had information that Lee Harvey Oswald frequented the Society Page Bar, 100 block of Exchange Place. He suggested that we speak with the following people. Martha Howard, Ricky Porter, David Ryder, Ray Potter, Billy Daltman, and Bobby, last name unknown, a barmaid at the Society. Okay, let me fucking stop you right there. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't drink. He didn't hang out at fucking bars, okay? This is Kerry Thornley. 100%. It's in New Orleans, and this is where everybody fucking mixes up Kerry Thornley and Lee Harvey Oswald. But Oswald didn't know none of these fucking people. This is obviously Kerry Thornley. He suggested that we could, and here if Dean Andrews is implicating someone who I believe is Kerry Thornley, that means that the story about Oswald going to get his draft decision that was upgraded from a dishonorable to an honorable discharge. That whole story is bullshit because it was probably, that seems like a planted story too. That's not something that Oswald would be concerned about at this time, especially since he's fucking out working with the FBI. He suggested that we could locate most of these people through Martha Howard, who might be located through Dee's hideaway somewhere in the vicinity of Dauphine Street in St. Anne. Also, Andrew suggests we speak to a man by the name of Wright. This is the same individual who struck the reporter outside of Clayshaw's apartment on the night it was searched. His full name and address can be ascertained from police records since he was charged with simple battery as a result of the aforementioned incident. Interesting. Office of the District Attorney, Parish of Orleans, State of Louisiana. Statement of Thomas Lewis Clark, white male, age 19. Presently employed at the Century Printing Company. In June 1964, I met David Ferrie through my brother, Stephen Randolph Clark, who met Ferrie approximately 2 days before I did for a job at a filling station he owned. Duval's service station on Vets Highway. So I went over there and I noticed that there was something about him that was weird, but he seemed smart and talented. He seemed to be all right. I got to know him by working there, and that is where I met Jimmy Johnson. Then my brother was mostly with Dave more than I was. I really didn't get to know Dave until 5 months later, and from then on we seemed to be friends. When I was working at the filling station, I know I saw a small white compact car, foreign, Renault type, come there twice. I couldn't make out who it was, but it was a big man. Dave told me both times he wanted me to watch the service station while he talked with him for a few minutes. He would wind up staying in the car for over an hour. The car never came and got gas. He just always pulled up on the side and Dave would walk over there and get in the car. They would be there about an hour or so. Dave sold the filling station and he asked me if I wanted to work with him as a flight instructor at the airport. He was working for Saturn Aviation at that time. I agreed and more or less hung around out there, and there wasn't much to do. He quit and opened his own flight school. He asked me to work with him there. This was 1966. I lived with Dave at one time for about 2 months. This was right before he died. I have been to his apartment quite a few times. Did Dave ever talk to you about his activities like flying down to Cuba and the Bahamas? He told me once he went to the Bahamas. Did he do much talking about the investigation, Kennedy assassination? He said something about you all didn't know what you were doing. He was in bed, sick. That cuts off there. There's obviously more to it. Another memorandum, March 9, 1967, to Al Oser, Executive Assistant District Attorney, from Sergeant Tom Duffy and Officer C.J. Navarre. March 7, 67, 7:30 p.m., PM Officer Navarre interviewed a Mr. Charles Holliday. This interview was conducted by phone at 362-5087. Mr. Holliday stated that he was a member of the CAP New Orleans Squadron from 54 to 56. In 56, he then went on active duty in the U.S. Air Force. Mr. Holliday related that he knew David Ferrie from being a member of the CAP. Further, that David Ferrie was a weird character. He heard later that Mr. Ferrie was within airlines. The only thing that stood out was the fact that Ferrie mentioned several times he had a drug or a combination of drugs that he could take, and no doctor could say he didn't die a natural death. Mr. Holliday related that he never did personally see Dave Ferrie mix any drugs. Also, that he has never gone to Dave Ferrie's house. Mr. Holliday stated that 5 or 6 boys were close to Ferrie, and one of them was Tommy Bowman, who at present time is not residing in New Orleans and it is unknown where he's now residing. Also were Mr. Penegui, Charlie Robertson, and Phil Cousins, who had a brother by the name of Pete Cousins. Charlie Robertson is a captain in the U.S. Navy and stationed in California at this time. The Cousin brothers may be residing here in New Orleans. It is unknown where Mr. Penegui is now residing. Mr. Holliday stated that most of the group he was connected with in the CAP resigned at the same time in 1956 and entered various branches of the armed forces. Mr. Holliday stated that Mrs. Durr would have pictures of the entire group because she was always there when they were on maneuvers and inspections. Miss Durr was the commanding officer of the female CAP. Oh, that sounds fucking ominous. Ugh, a female CAP? Wonder what the fuck happened to them. Captain Ferrie would tell them that they were training for guerrilla warfare because this was the most effective way to take over a country. The group had rifles to train with that had lead poured into the barrels. Mr. Holliday stated that Captain Ferrie resided on Clay Street in Kenner during the time he was with the CAP. Further, that some of the boys, especially Tommy Bowman, would go to his home. Further, further that at this time, Captain Ferrie had a Stinson Voyager aircraft in running condition. Further, that he thinks the aircraft was wrecked by a hurricane in 57 or 58. So Garrison is collecting these documents, all trying to build a character profile of David Ferrie, right? That's what a lot of this stuff is. To Garrison from Sergeant Duffy and Detective Navarre. Interview of Mike Finney residing at 1418 Berman. Mr. Finney was interviewed in regard to his connection with the Civil Air Patrol. Mr. Finney stated that he joined the CAP in 58 and was in New Orleans Air Squadron. This was the first time that he met Dave Ferrie. He was also in the original Falcon Squadron and that Dave Ferrie had formed. There were originally about 10 men in this outfit. He stated that he remained in the Falcon Squadron until about 61 when he found out that this was not a valid branch of the CAP. Mr. Finney stated that while he was connected with the CAP, he had never met Oswald or had never heard his name mentioned. He also stated that Mr. Larry Atkinson was a friend of Dave Ferrie's at this time. He also stated that a Mr. Al Sheremy was in the New Orleans Squadron and that he was a very close friend of Dave Ferrie's. Now, if you'll recall, Al Sheremy was the case that David Ferrie was involved with where he had molested Al Sheremy. It's his recollection that Al Sheremy joined the Marine Corps in 62. He also stated that he knew Johnny Johnson, who was a member of the squadron at the time, and that Johnson, as far as he knows, is a student at Tulane University at this time. He stated that Johnson lived somewhere in either Algiers or Gretna. He may live on Newton Street. Finney stated that a Major Morrell was the head of the CAP New Orleans Squadron and that he was also a very good friend of Ferrie's. He also stated that Johnny Johnson's mother had told him that Ferrie helped Morrell a number of times with many problems. At this time, Morrell was a shoe salesman in New Orleans, and it is understanding that Morrell left New Orleans and he is staying somewhere in Texas. He stated that on occasion when he was in the CAP, he stayed overnight at Dave Ferrie's house. Johnny Johnson and Al Sheremy also stayed at Dave Ferrie's house overnight. He stated that Bob Boylston was a cadet commander in the CAP, and he was also a very good friend of Ferrie's, as were John Irian and Al Landry. It is Mr. Finney's understanding that Dave Ferrie had a disagreement with Major Morrell, and at this time, Ferrie broke away from the New Orleans Squadron and formed the Falcon Squadron. While in this office, Finney was shown pictures of Oswald, Clayshaw, Guy Bannister, and several others, and could identify only David Ferrie. To file from Louis Ivan, what's this? Past and present addresses of David Ferrie. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff here. So 47 in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, this becomes important later on because David Ferrie maintained connections with what the fuck was his name? He was a Catholic priest who worked at the St. Ignatius High School that David Ferrie went to. And who else went to St. Ignatius High School? Danny Green, the Irishman, okay, who happened to be the tall tramp in Dealey Plaza. And so the fact that David Ferrie is from Cleveland is significant. The fact that there is records of him having flown to Cleveland at least twice in the months leading up to the assassination also relevant, because there I'm sure he was talking to mob guys. He was probably in contact with Licavoli and Leo Masseri and all those fucking guys to organize this shit. 48, he's in New Orleans. And then 1949, he's in Tampa, Florida. Okay, this is some weird shit here in Tampa, Florida. Let me explain. So, his 1949 tax return in Tampa, Florida showed that he had a dependent. Okay? Two, actually. Two dependents. So if you're married and have a kid, you have two dependents. That's kind of how that works. There's zero information on that. However, I think we'll get to it in this file at some point. When Eastern Airlines does the investigation onto David Ferrie about him fucking using the planes to molest kids and all this stuff and doing gay shit in the airplanes, they set up they have a private detective set up on his house. And so there are at least two different references in this file, I think, that we're going to get to at some point, that show one of the vehicles that was registered, that showed up at his house, was registered to a David William Ferrie Jr. Okay? David William Ferrie Jr. A close associate of mine tried to tell me David Ferrie was David William Ferrie Jr., but no, David William Ferrie's parents were like fucking Bob and fucking, whatever. So it was definitely not a junior. He is not a junior. So the question of who the fuck were his two dependents in 1949, and why is there a David Ferrie Jr. with fucking cars registered to him? I don't know. I don't fucking have an answer. to that. We know David Ferrie wasn't totally a homosexual because he enjoyed watching the straight fuck films, right? So could he have been married and had a child in 1949 that later never wanted anything to do with him, probably changed their names and all that stuff? Maybe. I don't know. And the fucking problem is nobody knows. 1950, he's back in Cleveland. And then from then on out, he's in Louisiana. All right, March 14th, 67, to Louis Ivan from Fenner Sedgebeer. What a name, Fenner Sedgebeer. At 2 p.m., March 13th, 67, Sedgebeer, in company with Niedermeyer, interviewed Reverend S. Arjonia, pastor of St. Hubert's Catholic Church located in Garyville, Louisiana. Father Arjonia, or Arjonilla, however you want to pronounce that, was shown a set of photographs wherein David Ferrie appears in order to ascertain whether or not Reverend Arjonia could recognize Dave Ferrie. However, Reverend Arjonia could not identify him. The following is a tape recording of the conversation with Reverend Arjonia. He came to the house once or twice. He was promoting some kind of philosophy to the children. I don't remember how many he said he had. He was supposed to be a theologian studying for the priesthood, but had been kicked out, Ferrie said. I said that was philosophy for what, but he says he was having these youngsters come around him and he was teaching them about God and different things, and which I was not interested in his work, you see. And once then a second time came to Thibodaux, and I asked him to ride with me. I wanted to find out what his mentality, you see. Then I get to find out that he was flying a plane in New Orleans. He was a pilot, and I asked him what the things that a pilot does. But that's all, nothing else. Well, when was the last time you remember seeing him, Father? 11 years. You see, I'm here 4 years and 5 years in Raceland and 5 years in Kenner. During that 5 years, he was flying a plane, I think, somewhere in Kenner. He was a pilot there, and he used to come to my church. That would be around 1963. And some of the boys told me that he had bought it, referring to the plane. Then I heard again someone that he had gone to prison. Somebody told me that he went to prison. Did he? Well, he was in trouble or something. Yes, right there in Kenner, right by the airport, out past the dead end. That's one of the older pictures when he had lost all of his hair. And that's one of the other ones with his wig on. Every bit of the hair. It's a little blur. 11 years. Let me get your full name. Reverend S. Arjonia. I was a pastor of Kenner, then he used to come by my church there. I was surprised to learn that he was a devout Catholic toward the end there. He died? You mustn't read the papers. Is that the same fellow we're talking about? Yes. I don't know it was the same fellow. I don't know him by his name. I don't remember his name. You never heard from him in 63? No. Were you a pastor in 1963? Yes. I was 6 years in Kenner, but I don't remember what year I was in Kenner. Well, you didn't remember any people coming to you saying that you were referred they was referred to you by Ferrie. He had a bunch of boys, and they used to go in his house, and some of the boys, I said, son, that's not good. The man that's teaching you about God is not favorable, not good. That was the last I heard. When I heard from him, he was in some trouble. The next time I heard from him again, he came to my house and said, Father, I used to be a theologist, a philosopher. So I was very glad to hear that he was a theologian. He lived somewhere around Kenner. He had a farm there teaching some young men about some kind of subject in aeronautics or something. I don't know. Then one day I asked him to come to me to Thibodaux as a ride, and then I would like to learn more about his theology, and we talked. I had some other fellow in the car with me, and we went back to Kenner, and we went home, and that's the last I saw of him. And you say that's the same fellow. Yes. I went to Kenner, and from Kenner I went to Raceland, and I lived in Raceland for 5 years, and then I came here. How about Sister Lavrentia? She's at Charity Hospital. She's been there for 35 years. I don't know. Who is she? I don't know what order she's in. He knew many religions because as he was a religious philosopher and theologian in the secular churches, I think he was about to become a subdeacon, but he didn't make the grade and then he went out. I don't know the reason why. I didn't ask him, but he has known various people. In other words, he wanted to make himself acquainted with various religious persons because he too was once a religious. Man, people talk differently back in the 60s. He classed himself as a psychologist in the directory, and his main living was derived from piloting an aircraft. In New Orleans, I know. I, being the pastor, he visited me, you see, come to say hello and wanted to make himself known to me. The second time I heard of him, he was having a group of young men whom he was teaching them certain things about God and so, but I did not favor it because I did not think he came in the right period and said, well, Father, I would like to have you help in teaching I'm assuming that's supposed to be Catholicism. I would have encouraged him to come and help him along, you see, but he didn't come. He had his own way of thinking. You say the name Lee Harvey Oswald doesn't mean anything to you. I don't know. Was Ferrie ever in the company of someone when he came to visit you? Was he always by himself? Yes, always by himself. He really gives an impression. He comes to church in a uniform. He gives a very good impression. What kind of uniform was he wearing? Black? Black, sometimes jet black when he was in the service at the airport in the airlines. Regular commercial line uniform. It never rang a bell when this person died. You never noticed his eyebrows appeared to be glued on or painted or makeup on his face? No, I didn't notice. Well, this was inaudible. That was 11 years ago. 11 years. But he has been located down here for several years before that, since the 40s at least. He must have been moving around because at the last part, he came to Kenner to live near the airport, you see. That must have been around 1956. I've had 5 years in Raceland, and I had 3 years here, and it's 9 here, huh? 8. I tell you, my housekeeper knows the years I've been here, Mrs. Henry. Miss Henry, yes, Father? Would you come here, please? She remembers the dates and all. You remember when I left Kenner. What year did I go to Raceland? Miss Henry says 58. 58, that's it. Miss Henry, you went in 52 to Kenner. 52, and then in 58 to Raceland. She keeps the dates, so. Miss Henry, and we've been here for 4 years. Here 4 years, thank you. It was right before you left Kenner that you saw Ferrie? Well, it could have been about a year, the latter part of that year. Yes, the latter part of that year. That was 63. We left in 58. Oh, 58, then you went to Raceland. Then you had no reason to believe that he was preaching anything but for the good of religion, but he just wasn't qualified. I found this, that if he had come to me and helped me, you see, but he was doing what he wanted to teach in his own way of doing this. If he wanted to help me, he could have come. You had no reason to believe that he was preaching against the church. No, because he goes to church regularly, and Sunday morning he was there. He was very courteous. Niedermeyer, what church was he buried at? Way down in Chalmette, only 2 people showed up for the funeral. Down in Chalmette, he got buried in the St. Bernard Memorial. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm going to have to fucking look for that. You see, what you come and told me just now, I never knew the Ferrie that came to see me was the same. Well, you probably didn't recognize the picture. Niedermeyer, something happened to all his hair. He was balder than a cue ball. He pasted his eyebrows on. I know he had a bald head. This is how I know him. This is all I wanted to find out. Maybe Oswald had visited you. But information I got he did when these boys got in trouble. He was actually telling them to come and see you. You were a very good friend. He came twice, once to recommend himself to me for my disposal if I wanted to use him for religious purposes, but I told him he could. He never came. He had his own thing. I never saw him anymore. All right, so, God, this is going to be a monster to get through. What do we have here? It says FBI report, CD 75, page 301. This page is one of the 40 classified pages on Ferrie previously listed. It comes from a file on Ferrie which they have in the archives and which the archivist is letting me see bits of. He has to check through each page to see if it is classified. Presumably, he slipped up by letting me see this page. Aha, so we're in for some good stuff here. Herman Coleman, Assistant District Attorney of Parish Orleans, advised that he is familiar with David Ferrie from his past experience as a news reporter. Coleman said he prepared a feature story on Ferrie's activities several years ago. He advised that he heard that Ferrie was mentioned in connection with being associated with Lee Harvey Oswald, and he talked to Jack Martin, a private investigator who refreshed his memory about Ferrie. Based upon these facts, the District Attorney's Office instituted an investigation involving Ferrie. He advised that Ferrie was interviewed by members of the District Attorney's staff and denied knowing Lee Harvey Oswald or having any information about Oswald being in the Civil Air Patrol. Coleman stated that the District Attorney's Office had received information from the intelligence unit of the New Orleans Police Department who had previously conducted inquiries regarding Ferrie's connection to Cuban activities. An unknown police officer had told the intelligence division of the New Orleans Police Department that he was in the Civil Air Patrol with Lee Harvey Oswald and that Ferrie knew Oswald. Something that because Ferrie must have known Oswald and because it appeared he can't read that. Something denial, something Oswald Ferrie was arrested. 11-15-63, attention, New Orleans, Louisiana. File number 8969, date dictated 11-25-63. The handwritten note on this page is, how can this be classified? Which makes sense because there's nothing in this that is not known. Well, maybe it was not known at the time. Okay, so all right, so what we're moving into now is a big chunk of documents on David Ferrie's involvement with Eastern Airlines and the allegations made against him, which ultimately resulted in his termination. He was gay. He was doing gay shit on the planes, and they knew it. Okay, so that's what it comes down to. Was possibly involving kids also. So let's move into some. I'm not going to cover all of this stuff because we'll be here for a fucking year, and it's kind of dry and somewhat irrelevant. David Ferrie is a pedophile, and that's all you need to know. And he got fired from Eastern Airlines because of his pedophilia. I think they called it like crimes against nature or something like that back in the 60s. Held on Monday, this is a document in regards to Ferrie's hearing, held on Monday, February 18th, 1963, so about 8 months before the assassination, commencing 9:15 a.m. in the Administration Building, 4400 Northwest 36th Street, Miami, Florida. Lists the members of the board. The important thing here is that G. Ray Gill is representing David Ferrie. G. Ray Gill is Carlos Marcello's lawyer. This first page of transcripts. Let me see. Mr. Gill, I'm not at all too familiar with these hearings. And again, this is frankly my first appearance, but having given a lot of attention and thought to this gentleman's position, I deem it only consistent that before proceeding with the hearing, we file with you that we consider something representing his appropriate rights. Then the petition for show of good faith and clean hands. Those aren't in the proper order, but as I say, this is my first time. I have an extra copy if you gentlemen should want it. And then this other one. My reference is one of those documents was within the idea of setting a case for hearing, and it was my understanding that it was just to agree to the hearing and not by any agreement on our part to waive any rights of Captain Ferrie. That is the reference I made there. And so then I'm going to skip over most of this because most of this is irrelevant. Like I already said, Ferrie was a pedophile, and all this stuff really just goes over, God, how many pages of this shit is there? Let me see. 57. Fuck. All right. 69. Jesus Christ, there's a whole lot of this stuff in here. All right. So let me back up. It looks like we got to the end of that stuff. So ultimately, Ferrie gets fired, right? I believe charges were brought, and then those charges ultimately some were dismissed and some he was found not guilty. But come on, David Ferrie, you got to know he's got connections to the judiciary in New Orleans. So here we go. We have his Eastern Airlines. This is his application for employment. This is another thing that was a point of contention in the Eastern Airlines hearing, because in the Eastern Airlines hearing, they were looking for a backdoor, right? If they couldn't outright get rid of him for the reasons they wanted to, they were going to try to get rid of him for omitting stuff from his application, which is a common tactic, right? So let me see. In case of emergency, notify Mrs. James H. Ferrie, mother, right? Okay, so back to the David Ferrie Jr., right? So Mrs. James H. Ferrie. So David Ferrie's father's name was James Ferrie, all right? Not David William Ferrie, making David Ferrie a junior. So there is a David Ferrie fucking junior out there somewhere. Somewhere. God damn, it's making me anxious to go look for him. Yes, that's probably one of the biggest mysteries of the assassination, is that who the fuck is David Ferrie Jr.? Personal references. This is back in like what fucking year is this? 50 something. So it's only 56, I think he said it was. Personal information. Let me see. This is his past work history. Let's take a look at this real quick. So it looks like he worked for Atwell, Vogel, and Sterling. Don't know what that is. Bankers Indemnity Company in 1950. Jeddah Oil and Drilling Company. The Jeddah Oil and Drilling Company, that's in 1950. That struck me as rather interesting. He worked for a year for Standard Oil in Cleveland. He worked for St. Charles for 4 years. That was the seminary, I believe, where he got kicked out of. David Ferrie seems to get kicked out of everywhere he goes. Kind of what happens when you fuck kids. What office machines do you operate? Typewriter, adding, compter, mimeograph. If applying for mechanical work, do you possess hand tools? Okay, so this is your typical stuff. This is his job background, his background history. Education, St. Patrick's. Then he went to St. Ignatius, where he graduated in 1935. St. Ignatius is the high school he went to, where the Irishman Danny Green went. Baldwin Wallace University. Allegedly, he graduated from there. There's been I don't think there's any proof of that. I don't think there's any documentation. One thing I learned is that you can straight up lie about where you went to college and that you got a degree and go on to be very successful. I actually have a friend who fucking lied about going to college and got a job as the assistant editor of the fucking Village Voice in New York. Totally fucking fabricated his fucking history. The guy was super smart, but still, he lied about he never went to college. And he lied about it and got a job. So you can definitely lie about your college and fucking get away with it. World War II record says no military service, but that's not 100% true. I believe that we'll find some indications that he might have done some work with the OSS during that time. Supplement to application for employment. Yeah, none of this stuff is overly relevant. Just, where it is relevant is going through the background, the jobs, the employment, the education, to look for contradictions and stuff. If I'm not mistaken, there was a gap here. One of the problems that they had during his hearing was that they found a gap in his employment history that they finally decided to bring to their attention. But I have a feeling that between 45 and 47, he was doing something with intelligence, because he was seen down in Sarasota, Florida in 47 with Clay Shaw at the airport down there. So he was obviously involved in something. All right. Traits not considered cooperative, above average initiative, but seldom used it to good advantage, and does not particularly possess the ability to get along with others. Health habits: appears to be in good health, has no known impairments, presents a favorable appearance, and does not engage drink or drug habits. Oh, bullshit. Yeah, so this is all his background stuff. More personnel selection. So he was run out of the seminary, St. Mary's in Cleveland, in 1940, because he was obviously, we already talked about his pedophilic nature. Let me read this. It says, why leave the seminary? Requested by rector not to come back the following year. Tore up letter for certain reasons, in quotes, mentioned in the letter that were not further explained. Messenger Hagen tried to find out for him and did not succeed. Ferrie say perhaps because I was too impulsive. Says philosophers never had contact with Ruchter, never had any personal contact with him. About twice a year, he would read rule to them in chapel and make a few observations. Dr. Furst was kind of perfect for House, not much contact with him either. Messenger Frey, or MSGR, well, I don't know what the fuck that means. Monsignor. Oh, Monsignor. Okay. Monsignor Frey was spiritual director, but too ill to do much beyond a 20-minute talk each Saturday evening. Confessors, total strangers. Dismissal was never appealed to the bishop. It is presumed that he approved Rector's action as a matter of course. Rector had to refuse to discuss reasons for dismissal with Ferrie. Okay, so Ferrie, don't need to get into it. Ferrie was pedophile. All right, so then the file seems to jump back to Ferrie's initial interview, so we can skip past this because we already covered it. Okay, so what is this? NPR, collect New Orleans, LA 23 1132P. Time Inc. For Nation, Garrison and JFK plot take 2, David Ferrie. From David Snyder. Time Stringer, a Stringer's a reporter, in New Orleans. Atlanta wants a rerun. So Ben Cate asked me to send full particulars on David William Ferrie. My first contact with Ferrie was a telephone call at 5:30 p.m. Friday, February 17th, following the appearance of States Item's initial story on the Garrison investigation. He had read the story and said he was tired of remaining silent in the investigation. He felt that he was being persecuted by the DA's office and he was afraid of arrest. Ferrie's voice was nasal and almost inaudible. He said he was physically sick. During our first telephone conversation, he was breathing unsteady. I asked Ferrie when I could see him. He told me to make it soon because he might change his mind about talking. I told him I'd be at his house by 6 p.m. I talked to him 4.5 hours Friday night. He called me at least once every day after that until his death. He was extremely sick, he said, with encephalitis. He was scared to death of arrest by the district attorney's office and was bitterly convinced that there was no justice for him in this world. The man investigated on 2 different occasions by the DA's office in connection with the assassination met me at the downstairs entrance to his apartment at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway. His steps were feeble as we climbed the stairs to the second floor. He apologized for the slowness, saying he was suffering from encephalitis, but assured me that he was not contagious. He also apologized for the condition of the apartment. He said the place was being renovated. The living room was heavy with the smell of stale cigarettes. Every ashtray was heaped with cigarette butts. Furniture greasy from sweat and dirt rested on a littered, threadbare carpet. An American flag stood in one corner. Next to it was a typewriter in a case. Dr. Nicholas Chetta, Orleans Parish coroner, said tests showed that the suicide note found in the apartment was typed on the typewriter. It is my theory that Ferrie had just about decided on suicide, and the time he called me Friday, he may have had the note written. When I talked to him, especially on the phone, it seems to me in retrospect that Ferrie just wanted to clear himself, then cash in. But by the time we had finished our conversation, he had perked up a little. He said that he would like to file a suit that would allow him to subpoena Garrison and expose the harassment Ferrie was going through. I encouraged him because I thought it would be a good story if he did file a suit. By the time I left his apartment, he was saying that he would prepare a suit all over the weekend to file Monday. He called Sunday to say he planned to get together with an attorney on the suit. He said he was feeling better and sounded better. By Monday, he was working in an attorney's office trying to get the suit together. The target of the suit was vague, but one of those sued would apparently be Jack Martin, a nut and a self-styled private detective who he said had supplied Garrison a list of names both in 1963 and last year to check out in connection with the assassination. Ferrie's name was on both lists. By this time, Ferrie was reading every scrap on the Garrison probe and taking almost a happy-go-lucky attitude towards the investigation. It is well known in New Orleans that there is a rift between the FBI office and the DA's office. Ferrie had been down to the FBI office Monday, he said, to talk to one of the agents. One of the agents told him, "I know where you were the day Kennedy was assassinated. You were cooling your heels with me in federal district court." This is mentioned in an earlier file. Ferrie said the FBI boys were chuckling about the Garrison investigation. Ferrie asked me if I could find out exactly when Oswald was in New Orleans. He said he needed the information for his suit. I looked the dates up in condensation of the Warren report and gave it to him. He said he was having trouble getting the suit together, but it was apparently occupying most of his day. He talked to my wife on Tuesday. He had a new theory on the trajectory of the bullets that entered Kennedy's body. He wanted to take me to a toxicology lab to show me what he was talking about with a cadaver. He also complained of headaches. By now, he had stopped asking me if I thought he would be arrested. He had become almost like a spectator as far as the Garrison investigation was concerned. He oozed good-natured confidence. I talked with him Tuesday evening, and he'd been watching a TV news show with interest. He was in a good mood. Wednesday, he was dead. The change in attitude over the space of almost a week leads me to believe that he was at low ebb when he called, but had decided to live and fight back after all. For this reason, natural death immediately made more sense than suicide. He left a long note, only 2 paragraphs of which have been made public. It has been described as philosophical in nature. The center of things in Ferrie's apartment was a coffee table placed in front of the couch. It held an overloaded ashtray and a cluster of bottles containing pills and liquid medicine. The DA's office said 15 bottles of medicine were found in the apartment. I would say there were that many on the table. On Friday, at least, it was the room of a man who had given up. Ferrie either propped himself up against the arm of the sofa or reclined fully against it, against 2 soiled pillows. He related the details of troubles that had reduced him from a man of means to poverty. It is a matter of record that Ferrie was arrested in 1961 on morals charges in Jefferson Parish with committing a crime against nature and indecent behavior with juveniles. New Orleans police reported Ferrie had attempted to intimidate one witness, a 16-year-old boy. We talked about that. It's Eric Cruchet, who we talked about. Did we talk about this, or am I just imagining it? I'm probably just imagining it. But Eric Cruchet was the boy who he had intimidated in reference to the Al Sheremy case. A 16-year-old boy who told the officer he signed a paper promising not to prefer charges against Ferrie. Other youths told police Ferrie took them on an airplane flights to Houston and Corpus Christi, Texas on different occasions. One boy told officers he had flown to Cuba with Ferrie, and another reported to police that Ferrie had asked him to drive a Cuban citizen to Miami. Ferrie was not convinced. All of the charges were nol prost. But about this time, Ferrie was bumped from the payroll of Eastern Airlines, where he had been a respected pilot. In our conversation, Ferrie contended he was framed by Jefferson Parish authorities, and in fact, authorities tried to shake him down for $5,000 to drop the matter. Ferrie was bitter at the world. He said the courts offered no justice, that the federal government offered no protection to citizens. From time to time, he broke into an almost nonstop narrative of his troubles to lash out at the law, at justice, and the news media. His head covered with a wig that was a rusty shade of red. His shoes off and a cigarette or cup of coffee constantly in his hand, Ferrie talked on and on. Once he questioned the Warren Commission report about the trajectory of the bullet that crashed into Kennedy's body. He dragged books on anatomy and physiology from a back room and launched into a medical dissertation of the assassination. He seemed to know the human body like his living room, and you caught flashes of brilliance as he expounded in his theories. It was because of his knowledge of science that he had become a part-time investigator. Ferrie is a pilot, he told me. But in complex cases involving science, several attorneys have found it advantageous to have me investigate for them. He worked for top attorneys in town such as G. Ray Gill, defense lawyer for mafia character Carlos Marcello. Whatever else he was, Ferrie was respected as an instigator and a pilot. He was considered by several people around town as tops as a flyer and an instructor. Ferrie would have been 49 years old in March. The reason for the Texas trip on the day Kennedy was shot, said Ferrie, was a spur-of-the-moment thing. One guy remembered there was an ice skating rink in Houston, so we decided to go skating. This version is disputed by one of the 2 persons who went with Ferrie. He said the trip was planned for a week, and no hunting equipment was taken, was Ferrie's claim. Ferrie's mind dwelled on arrest. He said several times he wanted me to arrange a lie detector test for him in case he was hauled in. I asked Ferrie if he thought the Garrison investigation was phony. Why, certainly, he said. How could it be anything else again, he said. My assessment of Oswald is such that he would be incapable of conspiring because he would be incapable of any interpersonal relationship, especially in anything as delicate as conspiracy to kill. Only a nut would be a co-conspirator because he was so erratic. Of the investigation, Ferrie said, psychologically, I think it's an utter waste of time. I understand that tonight television carried a story quoting a doctor who treated Ferrie as saying that Ferrie had been extremely sick 3 weeks before he called the paper. The doctor said Ferrie decided to call me at the newspaper because his friends had stopped calling him. When he called to find out why, they told him the DA had been talking to them. This was apparently the last straw. TV also quotes the doctor as being told by Ferrie that he wanted to file a $5 million lawsuit against Garrison. Ferrie told me that the suit would be against Jack Martin, whom he said started everything, and United Press International for something they had carried. I am vaguely on this point. One more point, Ferrie was listed in the city directory as a psychologist, regards David Snyder. That is very true. What is this? To Billings and Haskell from Angeloff in Washington. Life magazine letterhead. The Army was able to confirm only barest outline of what you already know about Ferrie's military background, but it is hard to confirm. He enlisted in the enlisted Army Reserve Corps on the 13th of April, 1950. He gave his birth date as March 28th, 1918, and was given serial number ER152960049. He was on active duty, Fort Unknown, from August 6th until August 20th, and from August 28th until November 25th, all in 1950. That break apparently was some sort of leave. He was discharged on April 17th, 1953 in New Orleans. Sorry it's so skimpy, but Army says it's all it has, since reserve records from that time are not kept in the Pentagon, and no one really seems to know where they are kept. So it appears that David Ferrie was in an enlisted Army Reserve Corps in 1950. However, we have to remember, David Ferrie was seen in 1947 at the airport in Venice, Florida, with Clay Shaw. Okay? So he was obviously fucking CIA at that time. So why would someone in the CIA go and, oh my God, I'm so dumb. What a fucking idiot I am. Okay, so I'm an idiot because I fucking realized years and years and years ago that the reserves were basically being used as a cover for CIA. Period. Okay, that's what this fucking is. Obviously, I can't believe I didn't put two and two together on this. He joins the CIA in 47 after probably having done some work with the OSS piloting a plane during World War II in the 1940s, from 41 to 45. There has to have been some connection there because he wouldn't have been connected to CIA people in 47 if he wasn't part of the initial clique. Yeah, so it appears that he was, in fact, in the Army Reserve, which, fucking duh, that's cover for CIA. That's how the fuck you got to go for 2 weekends a month or whatever the fuck it is, right? Well, that's how you get to go work for the CIA and you get to claim a cover of the Army Reserves. Fucking duh. I can't believe I didn't put two and two together on that. All right. So next we're moving up to this. We're moving up into some stuff with Sergio Arcacha Smith. So what I think I'm going to do is we're going to pause this right here and pick this up tomorrow because I'm still doing some other work on Sergio Arcacha in my book, and I want to go over this before I continue it further. So tune in tomorrow about the same time, noon, 1-ish, something like that. Sorry I don't have more of a firm schedule, but that will do it for today. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, and if you haven't yet, pre-order my book, buymeacoffee.com/JFK Book. It will be done soon. 2 chapters to go, people. So that's all, and have a great day.